If you look at where we are now compared to 70 years ago, you could say that racial segregation and equality have come a long way. And while that's true, it doesn't mean that everywhere in the U.S. is going to be perfectly equal or desirable nowadays. In fact, in a number of cities, there is still segregation, income inequality, and unemployment differences, for example, and even the chance of going to bed hungry being 6 times more likely just for being black in one of these cities. So, if you are a black American, you may be better off steering clear of the cities on this list. And so today, on Across the Globe, we're going to be looking at the worst cities for black Americans. Before we get into the cities, it's worth mentioning that the following list is based almost strictly off of data points that we believe could contribute to the city being less ideal for black Americans. This list isn't to say that black Americans shouldn't live in these places, as at the end of the day, the choice is yours and everyone is going to have their own opinions. Number 12, St. Louis, Missouri. Number 12 on our list is St. Louis, Missouri. According to data from Smart Asset, here, black Americans fare significantly worse from an economic lens compared to their white counterparts. Looking at the median household income, for instance, black households have a household income that's about half that of white households. Specifically, black households have a median income of about $28,000 compared to $55,000 for white households. These differences extend to education as well. Looking at those who hold bachelor's degrees, only 16.4% of black adults have attended college. White adults, on the other hand, represent 70% of all those in St. Louis with a bachelor's degree, even though they only make up less than 50% of the city's adult population. Obviously, attending college isn't necessary for everyone, but still a notable data point. Similar disparities are found when we look at homeownership, with only 31.5% of black residents of St. Louis owning homes. According to St. Louis Gov, white residents are almost twice as likely to be homeowners as black residents. And considering that homeownership is significantly linked to one's ability to accumulate wealth, this is clearly an issue. Number 11, Mobile, Alabama. Smart Asset recently named Mobile as the 7th worst city in the entire U.S. for black Americans, and when we dove into the data, it became pretty clear why. One of the key issues here regards the disparity in homeownership, which has actually been increasing in the past decade. In 2010, for instance, the gap between white and black homeowners was 19.9%, with a black homeownership rate of 48.9%. In 2022, however, that gap grew to 36.5%, with white residents owning homes at a rate of 73.1%, compared to black residents' rate of 36.6%. But the issues don't stop there. The median household income for all residents in Mobile is $44,780, but for black residents, that number is only $32,000. When we look at the difference between white and black residents, the number is even higher. As if all this wasn't bad enough, only 55.6% of black residents are in the labor force, which is one of the lowest rates in the country. Number 10, Akron, Ohio. Located in northeastern Ohio, Akron is a mid-sized city of about 189,000. Unfortunately, it's also considered one of the worst cities in America for black people. In terms of household income, black households here have a median income of $32,807 compared to the median household income of about $42,000 for all residents of Akron. Akron also has high levels of homeownership disparities, with only 31.35% of black residents owning a home. Furthermore, black residents see a higher rate of mortgage application denials at 52.9% compared to 32.5% for white people. One good thing is that the city appears aware of its issues and recently declared racism a public health crisis to try to combat some of these issues. This was due to findings that, probably unsurprisingly, racial discrimination has led to negative outcomes for patients and healthcare providers in the area. Number 9, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. When you think of Pittsburgh, you might think of a few things: steel production, food like pierogies, maybe even the set of Mr. Rogers. However, you might not think of racial disparities, but in fact, Pittsburgh is considered the 5th worst city in the U.S. for Black Americans when it comes to economic disparities specifically. Here, the median household income for Black Americans is less than $29,000 compared to $54,300 overall. The homeownership for Black residents is only 33.88%, and the percentage of Black adults with bachelor's degrees is only 21.4%. Compare that to the total percentage of all adults with bachelor's degrees in Pittsburgh, which is 45.7%. The consequences of these disparities are pretty significant. According to research by the Rand Corporation, for instance, just being Black in Pittsburgh means that you have a 6 times greater likelihood of going to bed hungry when compared to a white resident. Number 8. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Milwaukee was recently named the 3rd best big city in the U.S. to visit for 2023. However, the city's ratings when it comes to living there don't look as good, especially for its Black residents. Here, Black residents have higher rates of food insecurity, inadequate housing, and poverty than white residents. These factors can all lead to outcomes like health disparities, particularly when it comes to overall quality of life and life expectancy. For instance, white residents have a life expectancy that's 14 years longer than Black residents, and Black infant mortality rates are 3 times higher than white infant mortality rates. The disparities don't stop with health outcomes, though. Income and homeownership disparities are also prevalent. For example, the median household income for Black residents is a little over $32,000, compared to the citywide median of a little over $45,000. Furthermore, homeownership rates for Black people are some of the lowest in the country, at a rate of only 28.69%. Finally, Milwaukee is the most segregated metropolitan area in the country. Here, more than 3 in 4 Black residents would need to move in order to live in a completely integrated neighborhood. Compare that to places that are also historically thought of as segregated, like Detroit, where 7 in 10 Black residents would need to move to live in a fully integrated neighborhood. Number 7. Cleveland, Ohio. Akron isn't the only city in Ohio struggling to combat racial inequities. Cleveland also has its fair share of issues as well. Like we saw with Milwaukee, health outcomes are also poor for Black residents when compared to white residents. For instance, the Black infant mortality rate is 15.6 per 1,000 births, compared to only 2.5 per 1,000 births for the white infant mortality rate. That's over 6 times higher. Unfortunately, the disparities don't stop at birth. In Cleveland, 5 in 10 Black children live in poverty, compared to 3 in 10 white children. And the overall poverty rate for Black residents is 43.3%, compared to 26.2% for white residents. Number 6. Syracuse, New York. Located in upstate New York, Syracuse has a population of about 146,000, making it the 13th largest city in the state. However, when we look at its rankings when it comes to racial equity, things aren't quite so good. SmartAsset, for instance, ranked Syracuse the 2nd worst city in the U.S. for Black Americans when looking specifically at economic factors. Here, only 15.6% of Black adults have a bachelor's degree, and only 56.4% of Black residents are in the labor force. Meanwhile, Onondaga County, which Syracuse is a part of, has one of the worst racial income gaps in the entire country. For white households, the median income is $63,414, but for Black households, that number is about half of that, at a median income of only a little more than $33,000. Number 5. Cincinnati, Ohio. We've got yet another Ohio city on our list, with Cincinnati at number 5. According to that study I've mentioned by SmartAsset, Cincinnati is the worst city in the country economically for Black Americans. That's due to several factors, including the fact that the percentage of Black adults with bachelor's degrees is only 14.9%, and the homeowners rate for Black residents is 23.1%, the worst in the country. Furthermore, the median household income for Black residents is $24,359 compared to the overall median of a little over $45,000. Additionally, recent research has shown that Cincinnati's public schools suffer from racial disparities, particularly when it comes to school policing. For instance, Black students in Cincinnati public schools were found to be 8 times more likely to be expelled without instruction, 5 times more likely to experience emergency removal, and 6 times more likely to receive out-of-school suspension. Finally, segregation in particular is a problem, and while the city has seen segregation for much of its history, the problem still persists. For instance, nearly 1 in every 3 residents of Cincinnati live in neighborhoods that are at least 75% white or at least 75% Black. This has played a role in lower homeownership rates for Black people at a rate of only about 33%. Number 4. Fresno, California. 24/7 Wall Street recently published a report showing the worst cities for Black Americans according to socioeconomic factors, including unemployment rates, homeownership rates, poverty rates, and more. Number 10 on their list was Fresno, a city located in Central California that's just southeast of San Francisco. Here, there are not only health disparities, but also income disparities, employment disparities, and more. When it comes to health outcomes, the Black mortality rate is 20% higher than the city's white mortality rate. Income-wise, Black households earn about 59 cents per every dollar of income that the median white household earns. And household segregation unfortunately still exists today, potentially contributing to the homeownership rate of 25% for Black residents versus 66.5% for white residents. Finally, the unemployment rate for Black residents is over double that of its white residents, and it has the second highest unemployment rate for Black residents in the entire country. Number 3. Elmyra, New York. Elmyra shares more with Syracuse than just its location in upstate New York. It's also considered one of the worst places to live in America for Black people. Unfortunately, racial disparities here aren't anything new. Black residents of Elmyra have a median income that's only 42.6% of the income of white residents. Unemployment rates are 3 times higher for Black residents than white residents, and homeownership is startlingly low for Black people here at a rate of 22.4%. Compare that to the white homeownership rate, which is over 3 times higher at a rate of 71.7%. Number 2. Springfield, Illinois. According to a recent analysis, Springfield was named the 3rd most racially segregated metropolitan area in the country. Additionally, based on 2019 data, the difference in median household income between Black residents and white residents was the highest in the entire country. Things don't stop there, unfortunately. Recently, Springfield's poverty rate for its Black residents was not only almost 4 times higher than that of its white residents, but it was higher than all of the other cities in Illinois. For these reasons and more, we've put Springfield at number 2 on our list of the worst cities in America for Black people. Number 1. Toledo, Ohio. I know it's yet another Ohio city, but unfortunately, this state seems to struggle when it comes to racial disparities. Regarding Toledo, LendingTree names it the worst city in the entire country for Black Americans according to various socioeconomic factors, including homeownership rate, unemployment rate, and median income. Let's start off by looking at education. A recent analysis found that while suburban Toledo public schools are majority white, those located in the city of Toledo have a significantly higher percentage of students of color, including Black students. This is likely indicative of a larger issue of segregation within the city. Like we've seen with other studies, the problems don't go away after students grow up. For instance, only 14.8% of Black adults in Toledo have a bachelor's degree or higher, compared to 19.6% of the city's overall population. Moving on to income disparities. In Toledo, the median household income for Black residents is $31,106, compared to the overall median household income of a little under $42,000. Furthermore, only 8.6% of Black households in Toledo make $100,000 or more a year. Differences in homeownership rates are also an issue. For instance, while the overall homeownership rate in Toledo is 64%, the homeownership rate for white residents is 70.6%, and the homeownership rate for Black residents is only 31.6%. Finally, there are also significant employment gaps between white and Black residents in Toledo. According to research from LendingTree, for example, the unemployment rate amongst Black residents was 13.6% as of the latest 2021 census data, which is significantly higher than the overall unemployment rate, which was 3.6% in late December 2021. What about the worst states to live in?